I actually didn't like the word arbitrage when it came out because I don't think it's pure arbitrage the way hedge funds do. Hedge funds find the same stock, the same exact commodity, and sell it in another markets. Don't change it in any way. So that's real arbitrage. We're not really doing rental arbitrage because we're changing the product along the way. We're not offering a vacant unit for one and then cutting it up and then offering it vacant. No, we're doing a lot to it. We're actually building a lot of value in a big service.
This is episode number 20 of Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast. Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. So we just had a really nice review come in on iTunes from TXFan875. They left 5 stars. This is quite a long review, so I'm actually just going to share this on the Host Nation Facebook page, but I did want to share some of the key things that they did really enjoy about the show. They said that they like the best practices from other property management companies that could be applied to their business. They said they liked how mindful I was towards trying to direct the conversation towards like actionable ideas and processes. And they also like the variety of the guests on the show, which is nice because I am trying to get people that do have different types of success stories, whether that's co-hosting, whether that is property management. So I appreciate the feedback, TX fan, and I invite anybody who is interested, please leave a review. If there's something that you enjoy about the show, please let others know what you take away from the show. And if there's something that you would like me to maybe improve, or if you'd like to see something kind of change, feel free to reach out to me in the Facebook group, on Instagram, wherever you feel comfortable. Send me a message and let me know, like, hey, Julian, I would like to see more of this, or hey, maybe you can cut this out. And yeah, this is our show, so I want this to grow as together. This podcast this past month has just blown up. We have gone over 100% for the amount of listenership on the show, which is just so cool and so amazing. I'm glad that you are all enjoying this, and we do have a variety of content. It's not just in podcast. We do have stuff that is available on YouTube, and we also have the new podcast, Vacation Rental Machine, which is where John Bell and I, who was a previous guest on the show, we're breaking down right now, and we're actually giving a free course, basically a free masterclass on how to get started and scale up for making a vacation rental machine is what we call it. So it is very more action oriented, the short episodes, stuff that is very applicable that you can start doing like homework on. So I invite you all to join that show, and congratulations to all of us for the 20 episodes, and let's continue to just keep on going and try to just provide as much value and grow this community. And it is just going so strong, guys. Thank you so much. I am very honored. Today I had the honor of speaking with Farhan Abbasi. Farhan is based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and runs a co-working space called the Coalition Downtown, while also managing a portfolio of 15 properties, which are also located in the Boston area. Farhan has been in the rental arbitrage subleasing space since 2012, and throughout his short-term rental ventures has managed over 40 properties, but has had to scale back due to tightening regulations. In this success story, Farhan shares transitioning from climbing the corporate ladder in accounting and finance to leaving the rat race and taking up self-employment in hospitality, the steps to building systems that allow him to manage his properties part-time, and the challenges of tightening city regulations and having to dissolve a large portfolio of subletted properties. If you'd like my show notes for this episode, go to shorttermsage.com/STR20, or if you'd like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation. Today, I have the special honor of speaking with Farhan Abbasi. Farhan, would you please introduce yourself and let the audience know a little bit more about who you are and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals?
Sure. Hello, Julian. Hello, community. My name is Farhan Abbasi. I live in Somerville, Massachusetts. I grew up, born and raised in Toronto, and also Boston. So I bleed green, but go Raptors. I would say I'm one of the early adopters of Airbnb. I started hosting in 2012. Before that, I was 7 years at Ernst & Young, an accounting firm. I got my CPA. Because of that, I did a master's in accounting and pretty finance and accounting focused. And coming from a bit of a real estate upbringing with dinner table talks, listening to my parents talk about real estate stuff. So that's kind of the context I'm coming from, and happy to have a chat with you.
Nice. And do you mind talking a little bit about like what you have going on, and specifically, what led you to starting this short-term rental business? Because you also, before we started recording, you said that you started it. You're actually an OG in the space. You've been in this since 2012, doing the rental arbitrage method. So if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the stuff that you have going on, and then what led you into that.
Well, sure. So I have about three arms. So I'm self-employed. I don't like to overuse the word entrepreneur, but I have three arms in a way. One is a co-working space that I co-own, and I'm the operator of the Boston location. It's called Coalition Downtown. It's at 68 Harrison. So if you're a startup or entrepreneur in the Boston area, please come check us out. We have ice cream socials and good times. The second arm would be the short-term rental business, which I've been operating since 2012. Kind of on the side, it's pretty automated. I get involved, but I manage about 15 units for that, and I'm actually on a growth strategy to get into new cities throughout the country. And, one of the interesting things that I'm getting involved in is speaking to a lot of people in the industry. So I'd love to actually speak to others who are looking to grow with me as well. I'm happy to, if you give out my contact info, I'd love to talk to folks. And then my third arm would be a more traditional real estate syndications that I'm getting involved in. Most of the deals have been for me and our family assets. But I'm getting involved in helping out friends. And so obviously, if there's investors in the community that are looking to get involved and maybe in any of the three arms, I'd obviously be happy to talk. Those are the three arms. I didn't answer the question about like how I got involved in them, but I'm happy to spend a minute or two on that if you like.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind explaining like how'd you find out about the short-term renting, and then specifically the rental arbitrage method, and how you got into that?
It's actually, I like this part of my life. This was 7 years into being an accountant and auditor in Ernst & Young. I was, so first of all, my first year, I was held back. I didn't get promoted. And I was like, do I stay or do I leave? And I decided to actually confront it, and I stayed, and I spent a long 7-year career at Ernst & Young. But I made it to manager, got a CPA, and I felt like I had a certain, like I, kind of got the chip off my shoulder, proved it to myself. But along the way, like I just wasn't really satisfied. I had an offer to stay. They had me flying everywhere, which was awesome. It was fun. I was living in a hotel for 1 year straight. In my last year, I was at the W in San Francisco. I was living in Times Square, living in London, favorite barbecue, Kansas City. Like I was just everywhere, right? So, but leading up to that last year, I would take 3 months off each year to try a new startup idea. And a lot of it related to e-commerce or consumer products. I also helped somebody publish a book, stuff like that. But along the way, I realized that none of that was panning out. And one of my buddies pointed out to me that I had this safety net of going back to the job every single time. And so I never really got my neck, out there. So I took his advice and actually left the job, and I traveled to Southeast Asia, and I backpacked for 6 months. So while 1 year I'm living out of a suitcase in the finest hotels in the country and in London and whatever, the following 6 months I was backpacking like a champ, like every kind of hostel there is. And it was actually the best time of my life, right? Compared to fancy schmancy, the W. During that whole period, I understand, obviously as a consumer, I was a consumer of hospitality in all its forms. but I also like dabbled as a guest as in couch surfing, like the couch surfing travel community. And I loved it so much, and I really got like a true sense, I feel like, of the global travel community. I came back to Cambridge after my 6 months of travel, and we have a home in Cambridge. It's like a multifamily, and I started hosting to give back to the community, hosting for free as a host in couch surfing, and while working on my ideas. None of my ideas were really gaining any traction. They weren't really making revenue. I didn't even know how to like work these widgets and on WordPress, yada yada, right? So it was a slow process. I needed to pay the bills, and my father also needed help filling the rooms and the units. And so I helped him out. And what I did was I gave him an offer of, okay, I'm going to guarantee you for this whole like property, multi-unit property. I'm going to guarantee you this much rent, and I'm going to keep the upside. It was a win-win, and that's kind of how I got started with the first. I ended up like Airbnb my couch. So actually, let me step back. I Airbnb'd the empty room next to me. I was in a 2-bedroom apartment, right? I Airbnb'd one of the bedrooms, and I was living in the other. And then I Airbnb my room, and I lived on the couch. And, picture me like 29 years old, CPA, master's, left a Big Four accounting firm to sleep as a 29-year-old on the couch. And that was just like one of the most fun times of my life. I mean, I was single, right? But it was a fun time because I could just do whatever I want. But I ended up Airbnb the couch, and it got a little crazy, and I stopped doing all that room by room and couch by couch stuff. But I ended up moving to another apartment, but that landlord I got good with, and that landlord came to me anytime she had an empty apartment, and I said, do you know anyone? And I said, I can take it from you. And I explained to her what I was doing, and she was okay with it. And so that's how I got my first, like, almost like, non-family building, and just kind of took off from there. And that was back in 2012. I had to do a lot of education. I couldn't even talk to brokers about it. They weren't interested. But these single owners kind of like, gave me a chance, and I, appreciate them for it.
I just think that is super interesting. You started, you were on this real very strict, more set path, linear path for yourself, and then through just traveling and experiencing hospitality, you started learning about couch surfing, and then as this CPA with a master's who's got this really nice job, you just start house hacking, and then from that house hacking though, you kind of fell upon almost the rental arbitrage method. When did it kind of click for you? Like, okay, this makes sense. Like this could be a profitable business.
Right. So I was talking to a buddy of mine. We were playing basketball. I was telling him what I'm doing. He's very business savvy. He told me that it can scale, and I said, I spoke to a couple brokers. I spoke to a couple other owners, and they shut me down every time. And he said, he'll help me scale. And after, so he used a bit more of an online system where he would contact owners and all that stuff. And that's when, so we added some additional units together. Excuse me. So it was basically that year we kind of went, in. Like balls to the wall, right? So we just so 2012 we started. Now the issue was that like the way the operations was just such a mess. We did everything manually. We had like the partner and I didn't really like see eye to eye on things, and it was just like the wild west in terms of like what this Airbnb thing was. He and I ended up splitting. He took his units, I took mine. And it really didn't turn into a real business, I would say, until I started a channel management system and a virtual assistant to help, because up until then, it was mainly me. Every now and then I would try to hire some online host, but like a virtual assistant with a channel manager, like a channel management system. Those two elements made it so that it's a scalable business. With those in place and a number of other tools in place, I feel like I could like double in size with those capabilities.
Okay, so you're reaching out to real estate brokers trying to find units that were available. One of the rental arbitrage methods that a lot of people use is they'll try to work with like apartment buildings. Was this something that you were thinking of, or were you looking for more like single family house styles?
Oh yeah, no, I don't do single family. I don't see it being possible given Boston's makeup of inventory. My criteria is urban, like ultra urban, dense locations that have like specifically that have like about 5 reasons or 4 for anyone to want to be there. I don't want to rely on like just tourism or just academia, but it'd be like tourism, academia, maybe 2 or 3 other sectors, like finance, healthcare, etc. Boston obviously complies with all of that. And anyway, no single family homes in the center of Boston where and also being connected to the T and that sort of thing. It's apartment buildings. Now within that, we look at, all right, is it an old brownstone? Is it a 2-family? Is it a 10-unit? Is it a new construction? A lot of folks are very successful with new construction ones, especially the ones that are like new to the market and they have like 100 units to fill or 50 units to fill. You're able to walk in there with a bit more welcome, open arms. Everything else is if you get lucky or through relationships or through brokers.
How did you, because you started in 2012, this method wasn't as popular. There probably wasn't that much, people probably didn't really understand it so much, or they think maybe there was some opposition. How did you talk to people about, basically just subletting a unit?
Yeah. So, it depended on the audience. Most of the time they were non-institutional, non-professional, meaning they were, everyday owners. I would get on Craigslist and I actually look for properties that were no fee, no broker fee. And it's not because I was trying to avoid the broker fee, but it's because of being able to talk directly to some owners. Also, the broker fees, to be honest, do cut into the return on investment big time. So to the extent that owners pay for the fee, that's great. In Boston, tenants pay for the fee, so it gets tough. Anyway, but yeah, being able to speak to the owners allowed me to educate them on what I'm trying to do and why it's beneficial for them. And part of the time they didn't like agree, part of the time they did. Most of the time I found that like it worked when they were sitting on an existing vacant unit, maybe for over a month. And, man, like with the way real estate costs are and debt services, like sitting on more than a month of vacancy can like really hurt you. So it's a win-win. But yeah, I would reach out. I would say, I've been in this business for X number of years. I would, I'd love to see the unit. Sometimes I would wait for when we meet in person and explain. And the keywords were I'll guarantee your rent. I've never defaulted on rent. With an ordinary person, if they lose their job, they may, they may not be able to pay their rent. With us, we're diversified across a number of different units, and there's no job for us to lose. It's a strong market, a strong location, and we do a lot of work to make sure that when we sign a lease, we're very confident in it. There's a number of other things that I say, we do ordinary cleanings and inspections, and it maintains and keeps the unit in much better condition than someone who's going to be cooking and cleaning every day. I talk a little bit about the demographics of the people staying, meaning like the kinds of jobs that they're in and the kind of income levels and their lifestyles. They're not going to be sitting using up the floors and the walls. They'll be out and about and coming home and sleeping. So I do a lot of those talking points, and that's in a nutshell. I can go on and on, right?
I just think that that's super interesting, like how early you kind of started this, when there wasn't like any training back then. There wasn't any, and not much people were probably even talking about this method. So what was your experience with like your first unit, like, going up to a landlord, pitching them on this idea, and then getting that unit up and running and trying to, work out the kinks, if you wouldn't mind kind of walking through that?
Yeah, it's actually, looking back, it's actually a pretty exciting time. I think I used the words, it was the wild, wild west. It was, I was definitely coming up with it, definitely self-discovery. I don't even know where I got the idea other than, like I started with my own property, and I knew I had a hurdle. A lot of it, I was big on market testing. I actually read, there were 2 books that I continue to give as gifts, and that I read before I traveled to Southeast Asia. I took it on the plane with me, and I read them throughout my travels over and over again. One was 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and another was The Alchemist. So one's for the mind, the other's for the heart. And it really helped me along the way. I would say the sort of the concepts of automation, the concepts of leveraging, where you have a certain cost structure and then you have a revenue structure that's a lot higher. I actually remember using the word arbitrage, but internally I found that landlords didn't like hearing that, but they loved hearing guaranteed rent. But yeah, I don't know if I totally address your question, but like, how did I come up with the model before it was a thing and before it was talked about? I know there's an answer for this. I recall there being a moment, but coming from a CPA and finance background and real estate background, I remember this now. So one of my clients was a hedge fund that did mispricings and arbitrage. In that way, they would find a stock in one market and then sell it in another market, right? And so they were able to identify these opportunities. So like, I essentially noticed that Boston has mispricings and opportunities. Now, I actually didn't like the word arbitrage when it came out, because I don't think it's pure arbitrage the way hedge funds do. Hedge funds find the same stock, the same exact commodity, and sell it in another markets. Don't change it in any way. So that's real arbitrage. We're not really doing rental arbitrage, because we're changing the product along the way. We're not offering a vacant unit for one and then cutting it up and then offering it vacant. No, we're doing a lot to it. We're actually building a lot of value and a big service behind it. So, it's more of, creating I call it the leasing model. When people refer to like, do you own them, or, do you do rental arbitrage? No, I follow the leasing model. But anyway, but yeah, like, there's also the idea of like, giving owners a kind of a revenue share. And I found that the process for kind of the sales cycle for that was so long and so many avenues it could take, and kind of like, there's a lot of trust involved, and I got to send reports and all that I almost was like, it's just easier to grow if I just guarantee them a certain rent that I'm comfortable with,
Now, with this, because you've scaled up to 15 units now, obviously you have to have some really nice systems in place. And when you also have other jobs that you're doing, you have the coalition space, you're also doing other real estate ventures. So what type of systems did you have to put in place? Like what were what was your first systems, and now what have you scaled
Yeah.
up to?
Man, it is embarrassing to talk about my first systems. It was an Excel file that it was just for me, and then eventually I had to upgrade and get to Google Sheets. But I called it the master file, and it was like every unit, and then like no, maybe like dates, or no, every unit, and I don't know, like guests and dates, and it was just crazy. It was manual, man. You get a date wrong, it threw everything off, and it happened time and time and time again. And it, wasn't even. I ended up like anyway stepping away. One thing that I didn't do was, while I was so focused on adding units, I didn't like look up as much technology to help me along the way and save me time. My operations per unit was the same, and it became a headache. My excuse was that there wasn't enough tools in the market. There wasn't enough education. The market wasn't large enough. And suddenly, now we're at a point where we can use a lot of these amazing tools. So I use channel management system. Hostaway is what I've used traditionally, because I had signed on to a co-host. They have their own. I believe they use Guesty, very popular. Now that I'm taking it back, I'm probably gonna look at Logify. I've heard good things about, and I'm in the market for a good channel management system. I find that this is actually a very, very important topic for me, and I'd love to get real feedback from folks. I find that nothing really is out there that gives me exactly that I need right now, which is a lot of the auto reply and auto messaging functionality that is for non-Airbnb marketplaces, like channels. So like Airbnb, if you're going to stick to Airbnb, first of all, you shouldn't stick to Airbnb is my opinion. But if you're going to stick to Airbnb, you'll be fine. You have an amazing tool, like SmartBnB is amazing. And then all of the popular channel management systems like focus on Airbnb. But what if you want to like list on 5 other marketplaces and your own website? Like all of the channel management systems talk a big game about how they're directly integrated, and then you end up signing up or you end up like playing with the tools or whatever, and you find out that there's like limitations in every which one of them. I heard that Guesty is the one that's on the most leading edge of it, but I love to hear feedback from everybody, specifically on the auto message and auto reply for non-Airbnb markets.
So auto message and auto reply, that probably wasn't really something that was too popular back when you first started. But what would you say are like now in today's services is like the bare minimum, like what you need for your system, like your automated system to make this business as automated as possible? And then what would you say is like on the higher end, like once you are ready to start scaling up, what type of systems are best to implement?
Very cool. I'm going to wing this answer. It's hard for me to answer the second part. It's almost like looking ahead, but I love the question. Bare minimum right now, definitely anything that syncs all your calendars, such that if something is booked in one channel, it shows up on the others. Number 2, pricing service. Some people say that they like manually price. I mean, and that they know the market better than any of the pricing services. That's amazing. You should maybe like, I don't know, like have that as a service, because I don't know anyone that is really good at it. But I think a pricing algorithm, like a pricing service, like Beyond Pricing or Price Labs, Wheelhouse is another one. Those are the top 3, I think. One of them, like I think that's the second thing, is a automated pricing service. A third, I guess, honestly, it depends on if you have the time or not, but having some help. Right? Like a virtual assistant or a partner. but having somebody other than you want to be able to actually like take a break, and if you want this business to continue, if you're the only person that's hosting and you've got like more than 5 units or even 4 or whatever, you're going to get burnt out. So those are the 3 essentials. The third one being help. And as far as like to get to the next level, I would say build your own website and brand, but you don't have to spend thousands on it. There's plenty of tools, and I actually am going through like a rebranding, and looking to maybe see what's currently out there. Even the folks that have been doing this for years, you always want to like refresh yourself and try out the new tools. So I'll be doing that. And then, I've been playing with the idea of like a 24/7 kind of a call intake service, and for the website, kind of a virtual customer service, not a bot, but a live person. So those are the ideas that I have. And then the other thing would be, and I've shied away from this, but an online like a advertising campaign for your website brand, to the extent that you can actually build a brand yourself and get direct bookings. That's a lot of value, because if something were to happen to Airbnb or TripAdvisor, let's say you get kicked off or paused or you lose access, you want you want multiple sources.
Very cool. Now, are there any like other types of systems that maybe are kind of on the back end? Like there's, when you're approaching a new unit, do you have like kind of systems that you've created that aren't like things that you could purchase, things to maybe help your process when you're moving into multiple units at the same time, or anything like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, man. I've got a very detailed shopping list on a per apartment basis, mostly on Amazon. Maybe some IKEA, maybe some Best Buy. But I've had to add some units where I'm not even going to visit it, and I generally know the floor plan. But these list of items will go for generally any typical 1-bedroom in the Boston area, so that's one way. That is probably not going to be like, it's not going to do as well as a place where you personally visit, take measurements, maybe hire interior design. I've done that as well. Like I've done all kinds of ways to add units, I've done them all offsite. I've done them myself. I've hired an interior designer. And I think obviously the ones with the interior designer, I think looked the best. The ones with where I'm all offsite was like the best feel in the sense that I didn't have to get involved and I was able to do other things. There have been units where I haven't visited in years, man, but yeah, like, so I would say, just handing off a shopping list and to the mover, maybe you ordering it yourself and having it delivered and having the mover do it up. And then you kind of do an inspection in the end and see how it turns out.
I'm really curious about that, because you said that you've actually been able to have your systems in place to be able to fully furnish and get a unit ready and up without even having to visit it. Is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Now, what type of how can you walk me through that process? Because I've never heard of being able to do that. How do you manage a remote operation like that and make sure that it's up to your standard?
Sure. So first of all, it's all under the context of being too busy to make your visits. I think everyone will agree that it's ideal to go there and vet kind of be there for quality control. So assumption one is that you don't have enough time for this. Number two is that you have an on-site person that maybe not your employee, but a contractor that has done work with you before, or at least kind of like you've done some work with before. It's not like someone brand new. Okay, so I always have somebody who that I can call on for a general handyman, handywoman type stuff. Now, so anyway, the idea is that once you sign the lease, get the keys. Sometimes I don't even get the keys in my hand. I have it delivered to the handy person after making copies and stuff like that, right? And that person now knows the address, knows where to go and when for the furniture. I make all my deliveries. I give them a date of when to come in and start building, and that's it. And I give him a detailed steps of instructions, because it's not just take the boxes, open them, find out. It's got to be like these items go in the bathroom, these items go in the kitchen. So it's a lot of like actually you front load some of the planning and be very meticulous about it. Will help, like by doing that right, you're able to avoid having to do a visit and like, oh, we got to build this, we got to put this there, we got to do that. And so another thing that I did, which actually helped reduce the risk, is I had someone, one of my existing employees actually, for another business. I borrowed him for an hour to go and visit and, like take some measurements and all that, and then make the orders on Amazon based on what he saw. That turned out to be the best balance.
What that I think that is just super interesting. How do you like get the unit up to your standard though? Like going in there and placing things the right way. Do you have like someone like a designer that is going in there and decorating it? Like how do you instruct someone that maybe doesn't have the experience or creative knowledge to be able to set things the right way, unless you're going in there with like a FaceTime and pointing and saying this is where this needs to go?
Done that. I actually forgot to mention one last assumption, is that you've got to be okay with like setting some, like lowering some of your standards. Like it's really not, again, like stepping out of this, like it's always ideal. You're going to get the best product and probably the best ROI if you go in there and do it yourself, or have somebody who's like incented to have, the best looking thing. So, for me, what I've done is I've done the whole combination of like, so first of all, I've done so many moves. Like the 15 units is not just the 15 units. In the past, I've had, I think in total, I've probably had like 40 units that I've designed, and combination of either me doing it myself or working with interior designers and et cetera. And so I've gotten a fair share. I've got like a system. I've kind of have like we all like, I know that I want most rooms to have some level of like those IKEA plants, I just know that I want to order 10 of them and place them everywhere. And I just know that these are the kinds of rugs that go with any kind of apartment, et cetera. So, but then there are the finishing touches. And so I do like make a plan to do a final visit in the end, and I start rearranging or have a punch list of items for the mover. So make sure this is done. And if it's not done, like whatever, move on. You got to lower your standards a little bit, get the booking in, and sometimes let the guest be your quality control. Again, it's controversial. It's like probably not the best advice, but this is how sometimes you gotta leverage and scale that way.
So you would have someone actually go out to IKEA or other stores to be able to purchase those things that you typically frequently buy? Oh
yeah, absolutely. And then either I would I would have them send me an invoice, and I would pay them. But sometimes contractors need to be, they can't front it, so they need to be financed. And so I would have them call me from Home Depot. The Home Depot person would take my credit card. I rarely would do cash. I rarely would do like pay in advance. Like I've just learned lessons along the way. But you really got to trust someone if you're going to advance. But I found that like quality is always better when there's always a final check coming in the end when it's done.
Is this a type of method that you'd be able to do like completely remotely, like in another state? Like if there was maybe like a market that you're trying to get into, do you think that would be something that could be repeatable?
Oh, that is a tough one. It would be a gamble. Certainly achievable. People do this in traditional real estate all the time, and I think the way it's done is through introductions, through reliable people, right? So if me and you know, like for example, if you have an asset that you would recommend in Maryland, I would only do it if you are able to put together like kind of a team for me, or at least introduce me to a general contractor. And you would be able to, you'd be able to say, all right, well, this person has done 5 deals with me and they haven't let them down. So, all right, I feel a little comfortable with that.
What would you say would be the members of this team?
For an SGR perspective, the members
for doing it remotely.
Right. You would have the movers. So that's usually anywhere, probably 2 to 3 people. You would have the person who's designing and ordering. So it could be you, it could be someone on your team, it could be an interior designer that you hire. You would have an on-site quality control person. So if maybe the broker that helped me land this, or the next person would be a cleaner / maintenance person, and that separate person would be the person would come in and hey, how do you feel about the work that was done? And it would be like a FaceTime video and show me what you got. Maybe the movers are the same people as the cleaners and maintenance people, and if that's the case, then I would still try to find a third person. And thinking creatively, either I fly in, find a friend, or I hire someone on crisis. But you got to have like a little check and balance situation. All of this, it's a little tricky logistically. First of all, trust-wise, access to the place, but if you, if you can set up the right protections and communicate. So for example, like there's keys involved. All right, well, here's this key. You can pick it up at this office, but return it by this time on this day. So there's a bit, you're still never going to be guaranteed like no risk, but you can kind of like reduce some of your risk by having these systems and particularly by only hiring through introductions as opposed to resorting to crisis, which should be a last resort.
What would you say is the most challenging part of running and operating this type of business model?
The most challenging part?
Yes.
The most challenging part for running and operating, for me, I think would be the exhaustion sometimes of dealing with guests and complaints, because you get the same old stuff and some of it is out of your control. Some guests really want to actually just yell at somebody for 30 minutes, and some folks, you know what I mean, like don't understand that there's another person, another human on the other side of the phone. So that probably are those are the moments where I find that it's like, oh man, you almost question like, how long can you go on with this? That's why I always say like one of the 3 critical things that I mentioned, the third one is like help. Make sure you have like a support system, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest challenge. Everything else, to be honest, is like, part of, including this, it's part of doing the business, man,
Now, I wanted to hit on something that we were talking about before we started recording, and that is when regulations change. So when you first got into the space, 2012, there probably wasn't really too much regulation involved in this subleasing model. So now that it's gained popularity and there's more people getting into the space, and now there's a lot of concern with like affordable housing. A lot of these cities are changing their regulations, which can disrupt your business model. So how have you been able to pivot while areas are starting to come down on this type of model?
Right. Yeah. So I find that the regulations are ill-informed, and they're unfortunate. Meaning the bans. I actually would love to see regulations that require hosts to register, pay taxes. Just the stuff that other successful models such as Austin and Nashville have done. But unfortunately, the hotel lobby and other neighborhood associations, there's a lot of fear and uninformed context behind all this. Now, one of the things that I would highly recommend folks do is to get involved with some of the local alliances and actually get out there and not be afraid. I think one of the things that we didn't do well in Boston is not be as engaged. We didn't really come together. We didn't fundraise either. We did actually fundraise, but it really wasn't like a professional effort. It wasn't wide ranging. Everyone was kind of almost worried about their own selves, and it was very short-sighted. So now that the laws are put in place, first of all, we're hoping that it gets relooked at, and there's some efforts being made there. I know San Diego had a recent overturn of the ban, which is amazing, and it'd be great to see some sort of good compromise that protects property owners' rights and also allows the ability for progressive economic channels while maintaining affordable housing and inventory and choices for people to live. I actually think what's a cool model that people haven't, I know this is not particularly your question, but I've been wanting to say a good model would be if there's certain buildings that are specified as short-term rental friendly versus not. So this way tenants have a choice of being part of that or not, because I totally understand the argument against short-term rental, because in one sense is that you'd be living up in a place with your family, and you want to know who your neighbors are, but some people don't care, and so maybe some of these short-term rental friendly buildings, they'll have units maybe at a below market for long-term tenancy, and people might be okay with that. And in a way, that kind of addresses the affordable housing issues anyway. I also think that the impact to the rent prices is overblown. I remember in Boston, it was 3.9% during a 4-year period. But that was during a period where we had a 20% or 30% rent increase. So what about the rest? What's going on there? And also the regulations didn't really address affordable housing. It addressed market rate housing. And we one of the things that we tried to propose was a tax that would on every booking, where the funds would go towards affordable housing. Anyway, so what to do now? For Boston, you got to live there, or you've got to apply as a hotel, get a hotel license. And unfortunately, what that does regarding the so what it does, it actually cuts out the small businesses. Because to apply for a hotel license, you've got to operate at kind of a sizable level, like a Marriott, or a Sonder, right? Sonder, not Sonder. But you know, basically raise millions to be able to afford the legal fees and the operation and the branding behind it. But that's what Boston is right now. You gotta find the zones that allow kind of a hotel use, and then somehow find the apartment buildings that are dual zone, and then try to work out a deal with the landlord where you have to apply for the hotel license and maybe redevelop the units and yada yada. So it effectively takes units off the housing market anyway, but now the big boys are able to do it and do it at a bigger scale, whereas before it was everyday folks subsidizing their rent and small businesses, taking part in the new economy.
You know, I really liked what you said before about, kind of not using that term rental arbitrage, because you're not rental arbitrage. It kind of has like an icky sound to it. It's like you're finding a disparity in the market and you're taking advantage of that. But what you said is you're offering a service. You're taking a property that maybe wasn't that nice, and now you're making it beautiful, and you're allowing people to be able to travel in this nice location. So you really are offering a service. And when you've been in the space for so long now that you've built your business on top of this model of providing hospitality, and now as things have changed and there's a lot more talk about all these policies and stuff like that, it basically just kind of really changes can destroy your business.
Right.
How do you think that this is a sustainable business, the subleasing model? Do you think that it's something that can be continued, because you've invested so much time and money and energy into this market, and then when someone comes in and says you're not allowed to do this now because of maybe illegitimate claims, is this something that is sustainable? And how have you been able to, if you do find it's something that you continue, how have you been trying to pivot your business?
Yeah. That's the right word. The idea is to pivot. You can't fight against regulations. It's just not a real business model. And so I look at it as like, maybe those units are gonna roll off, but then you've got to be able to either find new markets, like new cities, or come up with new business models within the city. And one of the things that I've actually been playing with is a bit of more of a co-living business model, which is way too early for me to kind of get into in detail. But that's just an example of what to do when regulations hit your city. You gotta, so first of all, like new markets or new units that I sign, not in Boston, being careful about how much I put into it, because it could actually be taken away from you, right? And it could be not just regulations, it could be the landlord, right? Standard terms are 1 year. Obviously, I think I would prefer like 2, 3, 4, 5 year leases, so that I could putting in investment and I know that it's going to be there for multiple years. But landlords don't like to do that in the residential field. In commercial offices, they do, but not in resi. So it's all about relationships and hoping that the landlords like you enough to not jack the rents up on you. I actually have a landlord that is all month to month, and it's been going on for years, multi-year relationship, month to month, and like every now and then he'll raise the rent, and by like a substantial, like a kind of I have like 5 units with him, so it feels substantial every time, but it's probably like $50 a unit, but that's $200 a month extra, and like it gets I guess whatever, it gets like it's like a surprise sometimes, but in the so he always has me there, right? He always has the ability to like take it from me, and the same could be said for 1 year leases. So it's not just regulations, right? So I'm a proponent of being careful with how much you invest in the unit, and maintaining really good relations with all stakeholders, and the city being one of them. Like, don't be a bad actor in your neighborhood, right? Now, yeah. So I guess what to do? Cut your losses. You gotta try to stay filled as much as you're allowed, and then from there, to continue the business, you have to add units elsewhere. Unfortunately, Boston will lose this type of business. It's not just going to be folks that want to stay at hotels. It's going to be like families and international families here for hospital stays. And although there's a thing for hospital stays in there that allows it, I'll get into that a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm pivoting on is hospital stays and corporate stays. Those are two of the clauses or the types that are outside of the ordinance, or they're inside the ordinance, but they're the only exceptions where you don't have to live there. And so I've been working on relationships with marketplaces that focus on hotels. I'm sorry, hospitals and corporate rentals. Also, 1 month minimums obviously means that you're outside of the short-term rental ordinance.
So, but is this a business model though that you think is sustainable for people? Is this something that you would continue to do, having been in the space for a while now? Is this something that you think that is a sustainable business, even with the changes and the uncertainty and having to cut losses?
Right. I'm on a couple of short-term rental groups where we address these kinds of questions, and nationally. And every now and then you'll get folks that say, "Oh yeah, we're only 1 month minimums, and it's worked really well for us," or we only do like nursing stays, or we only do corporate stays. And I think there's some fragmentation in the market on this, meaning some folks have a relationship and they figured it out, and others are totally in the dark about it, and maybe they badly need it. So Boston badly needs, like all the hosts need more hospital stays and corporate rentals. But the issue is that I think there's already existing like channels, and whether they're travel agent intermediaries or it's really hard getting into the accounting firms, the consulting firms, and all the big companies, getting into the lodging managers' attention, on that. So there's some fragmentation there that needs to be addressed. It's also commoditized, meaning like there's so many players already. Now that the regulations are, everyone's rushing to offer their stays to hospitals and to companies. It's also commoditized already because there's a student housing market. Where but you can't get to X off of that. You're actually getting X, maybe a little lower than X actually. So the student housing market is commoditized and it's well priced. College students are really good at finding deals, and when they do find these deals, they'll find other roommates for them, and it's hard for you to offer anything of value.
But do you find the rental arbitrage subleasing model a sustainable business?
In general, absolutely. If there isn't a ban on it, it's a sustainable business because you're guaranteeing a rent for a vacant property, and then you're doing stuff to it. You're adding value. You're making it a home, a place to live, and then you're taking on like a risk. That there's some value there, right? Like people ask, like it's unfair for folks to look at it like, oh, you're only paying, $2,000 a month. Why are you charging me $4,000? But hey, you're only staying here for 1 month or two. Are you going to take the risk of the rest of the year? So there's actual like value being offered here. That person would never. Maybe if they have an 8-month stay, maybe they might take the whole. But now they have to like worry about like buying furniture and then getting rid of it when they're done. So it's a true like value. Now, is it sustainable? Absolutely it is. If it wasn't sustainable, I guess we wouldn't have year-round whole units on the marketplaces.
And last thing that I kind of wanted to hit on is you said that you did at certain points have like up to 40 units. Now you've had to scale this back quite significantly. What do you do with all those all that furniture, all that equipment?
Yeah, so I tried different things. I tried putting them into storage for cheap. I tried selling them, and I also, just threw them away. I found the simplest one was to unfortunately throw them away. And it kind of, it's unfortunate, but everyone had to do it. I mean, everyone who like moved out in Boston had to do it.
So instead of like taking that stuff and maybe moving to another location, you just decided let's just kind of drop it here.
For a portion, another portion for like I had storage for 3 apartments. I was paying like $350 a month for them. Had it for like 8 months. Like that's almost $3,000. And of course, the value of that furniture itself, meaning the cost of it, not the resale value. Resale value is almost nothing, but the cost of it was about like 2 to 3,000 per apartment. But so it was worth keeping it because I knew I was gonna possibly add more units. But at some point it started bleeding, and I was like, I just need to. So what I did was I furnished one apartment for it, and then I threw away the rest.
Wow, that's got to be really tough. Definitely really tough. Where do you see being in the space for so long? Where do you see the rental arbitrage subleasing model from where you started to where it is now, and where do you kind of see it going in the future?
Oh, I think that it'll expand hugely. There's a lot of like talk about it. There's a lot of influencers and people and coaches and stuff. So there's going to be a lot of people signing a bunch of bad leases. Actually, there's going to be a lot of failures that come up in the next year or two. There already is, but we're not hearing about failures. We have a positive bias when it comes to this stuff as humans, but there's going to be a lot of bad leases signed. It's gonna be everywhere, right? So in a sense, they're going to be commoditized, and so there's going to be a lower price. How do you say it? There's going to be like kind of a downward price pressure on the revenue side of things. And at the same time, there's going to be some lower cost side for managers and services. People will actually perform more efficiently, though. They'll know it more. They'll have more experience. There will be less of a cycle for educating landlords. It'll be either hard no or a quick yes, or easier conversation. So that's where I see it. I see everyone knowing about it. I see some failures. I also see a good amount of companies that will raise funds for it. We're already seeing it in the news. A few companies, but there's going to be a lot more.
And what would you do differently if you had to start from scratch?
Yeah, like I talked about how I was late to adopting new technologies. The one thing that I would do differently, I would say, is I knew the kinds of technologies that were going to develop, and I personally wasn't convinced of maybe my ability, or just first of all, I came from a context of me trying out certain e-commerce tools and consumer products, and that the road to revenue was longer than immediacy in rental arbitrage, like being an operator. So I went with cash, right? Cash is king. But it would have been fun to actually be one of the adopters of some of these technologies, because I just know I'm so opinionated about it. And actually to this day, I still, I know where some of the technologies and tools need to be and where they'll go eventually. Whether I want to put in the time investment and the capital for it is a different story. But yeah, and I'm in the kind of the startup kind of world, so it's not for a lack of resources, it's kind of unfortunate that I haven't capitalized and leveraged that. But that's probably what I would do differently. I would come up with some cool technologies and be part of the support system there.
And if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's trying to start a rental arbitrage subleasing business, what would that be?
Try to get your LLC to guarantee the lease and don't personally guarantee. Random info.
Okay, why is that?
From a legal perspective, if for some reason something were to happen or you are not able to pay the lease, so I don't advise on like not paying your obligations, but it does limit your obligations to the company assets as opposed to your own. And so, like I said, people are going to be signing leases left and right, and some of them will be bad leases, meaning the obligation to pay the rent is way too high, and it may not be enough. Like the revenue may not be enough to suffice. So just be careful with what you're signing. And another thing is to definitely don't like I've had some players that had been offering units to me and they overplay the amount of revenue they get. Don't fall into the hype. Do your financial modeling very conservatively. And if it works then it's good to go.
And what question do you have that you would like to maybe ask another professional host?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to someone who has tried all the channel management systems and which one had allowed the most functionality when it came to auto messaging and a slew of follow-up questions when it comes to third-party channel management.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Farhan. This was such a great episode. You shared so much information that I know will help so many people out. I'll include everything in the show notes, ways that they could reach you if anybody wanted to go to the coalition space, some really cool stuff in there. I'll include that in the show notes. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up this episode?
No, man, it was wonderful. Feel free to reach out. I'm particularly interested in speaking to folks that are looking to grow into new markets with me. And I'll shout out Nashville and Austin. If there's anyone that's local on the ground that wants to partner up, it'd be great to talk. Okay, definitely. I'll include that. And thank you so much. And until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting. All right. Thanks, Julian. Take care. Alrighty. Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation. Talk to you hosts in the next episode. Keep on hosting.